This is TechCrunch. If you've heard of Arc Boats, the Los Angeles startup founded back in 2021 by former SpaceX employees, it's likely because you've seen its sleek sport boats. But the company's also been pushing into the far less glamorous world of tugboats, and now has its first big order, worth $160 million. The company announced on Wednesday it has signed a contract of that value with Curtin Maritime, a tug and barge operator. The new hybrid electric tugs are expected to hit the waters around the Los Angeles port in 2027. Curtin has ordered 8 tugs at around $20 million apiece, and ARC will build them in conjunction with Snow and Company Shipyard. Specifically, these are what's known as ship assist tugboats, which help nudge behemoth cargo ships into and out of major ports like Los Angeles. ARC CEO and co-founder Mitch Lee told TechCrunch these kinds of tugboats are torque-generating machines, which are really cool, but the standard versions are powered by monster diesel engines that just spew black carbon and spew sulfur oxides into the air, damaging the surrounding environment and risking the long-term health of the crews who work them. Lee said these kinds of tugs are some of the worst polluting vehicles on the planet by linear foot. By largely replacing the diesel power plants with batteries and electric motors, more on the hybrid system in a moment, but ARC can help tugboat operators cut down on that pollution. And that puts them in a better position to comply with environmental regulations and improving air quality. And Lee expects the impact to be noticeable. While the deal with Curtin is just for 8 tugboats, Lee said there are only about 20 of these kinds of vessels in operation at the LA port overall, meaning this one contract can take a big bite out of those emissions. Swapping the main power plant from diesel to electric also helps save space, much like how electric passenger cars tend to have more legroom and storage space due to simpler electric drivetrains. Lee said ARC's hybrid system makes it possible to ditch things like large exhaust stacks that usually take up a ton of room on a tug. Now, he wouldn't get into specifics about what exactly tug operators will do with that space. Lee said it could veer into trade secrets territory, but he suggested it could mean more space for crew quarters, which is valuable since the people who work tugs often live on them for shifts as long as 2 weeks. And the removal of smokestacks means better visibility for workers in the wheelhouse, the control tower from where a tug is operated. ARC's boats have so far been all electric, and the company's ambitious mission is to electrify all watercraft. The new tugs will largely operate on electric propulsion, with the motors putting out over 4,000 horsepower drawn from a massive 6 megawatt per hour battery on board. There is a diesel generator, though it's much smaller than the power plants than normal tugs. Lee said it will only really kick in to help charge the battery back up on longer trips, or where marine charging infrastructure is lacking. Lee said there's the operation to turn these generators on if you need them. We never want an operator to have to turn down a job or be stranded because of insufficient battery on board. Otherwise, he said, the typically short and regular missions tugs tackle are tailor-made for electric propulsion. And since electric power trains are simpler in design, he expects there to be less downtime for maintenance with ARC's tugs. Combine that with the improved economics of buying less fuel, and Lee said he believes ARC's tugs will make a lot of sense to operators. But there's even more fundamental difference between ARC's new offering and the startup's sport boats. Lee cannot legally test out the tugs. Lee has spent hours whipping around lakes and shorelines with the ARC One, the ARC Sport, and ARC Coast, possibly even with some of the company's celebrity investors like Kevin Durant. But tugboats of this size require a special license, meaning Lee can't be behind the wheel. He has driven the company's much smaller, truckable tugboat that it announced earlier this year. Now, that has dampened Lee's optimism for the opportunity here. He said, "There's all this hype and enthusiasm around shipbuilding and around maritime right now, and a lot of that is focused on defense, but this is an incredibly important part of the economy. All of this commercial activity is held together by these tractors in the water that are pushing and pulling these boats into position. And we have the opportunity to go modernize this in a really compelling way." It has been a long road for the 20-year-old fintech Klarna to make it to an IPO, but on Wednesday, the company successfully landed on the New York Stock Exchange, having raised $1.4 billion, largely for its existing investors rather than itself. The fintech giant sold shares at $40 above its announced range of $35 to $37 and came out of the gate with a $15 billion valuation. Shares popped, opening at $52, though quickly settling down to around $46 midday. Of the 34.3 million shares Klarna sold, only 5 million were sold by the company. The rest were sold by existing investors like the company's largest shareholder, Sequoia Capital. Entities controlled by Silver Lake, BlackRock, and many others sold as well. Despite cashing out some shares, all are holding on to the majority of their stakes. Figma's IPO did a similar thing, yet often these existing investors don't want to sell at the IPO price. They kick in shares to help the company meet IPO demand. Floating more shares helps the company obtain a more accurate and perhaps higher valuation out of the gate because it helps the IPO attract the biggest institutional investors who would not bother with an IPO for a small allocation. Sequoia is by far the biggest investor in Klarna, controlling nearly 23% of the company. Famed VC Michael Moritz wrote Klarna's first check on Sequoia's behalf in 2010 and stayed on as Klarna's chairperson even after he left Sequoia in 2023. Some drama ensued when Sequoia added another member to Klarna's board, but it eventually sorted itself out when Sequoia's Andrew Reed joined its board last year. Interestingly, though, $1.4 billion is not the record for the biggest IPO of the year. That is still held by CoreWeave, which raised $1.5 billion in June. That's it from TechCrunch. For more stories like these, go to TechCrunch.com.